Hello, lovely people. Thank you for all the DMs on Twitter. I really appreciate them. Um, I thought it might be a good idea today to discuss myself a bit. The reason I initially posted the videos and what I think about the future of what has become a channel. I've been receiving a lot of DMs asking for content pulling in different directions. Some people want to discuss disability specifically, other people want to discuss accessibility to content, and other people just want to know how I'm doing in the game and what I'm playing in the game, and what sort of level of content that I'm doing. And that's been a little disorientating and confusing. When I set out to make these videos, it was at the request of my guildmates who strongly felt that they needed a video online to point people to or to refer new guildies to when they needed clarification on my guild's inclusion policy. And I never intended or expected the response that I have got. And while I'm overwhelmingly grateful to everyone who has got in touch, and to Tally and Evertol for the exposure, this has been a little overwhelming for me to deal with, and I appreciate you bearing with me while I get my feet. So about me. I started playing World of Warcraft back in 2005, shortly after it first came out. I was quite lucky at that time because the community was still very new and very inclusive. I was dawdling around Darkshore on my Night Elf Hunter, skinning mobs and trying to get a Ghost Saber tame going on, so that I could have a companion for my journey through Azeroth. And a group of players stumbled across me and invited me to group with them. Now I'd finished the zone, and so I ran around leading them through the zone like a demented Richard O'Brien in the Crystal Maze. That's a very specific reference. Google it. At the end of that, they invited me to join them on a more permanent basis, and eventually we established a guild. That guild survived until the beginning of Mr. Pandaria, when literally millions of players quit WoW en masse. But I was quite fortunate to have established a bit of a reputation, and I got another guild invite. And I was with that guild until the midpoint of Legion. I haven't been in a raiding guild since then because the majority of guilds on my server, which is a mid-pop server, are focused on progression and need a certain level of dedication, which, because of my health problems, I can't commit to. But I have been asked, and that's always nice. In the time I've been playing WoW, I have encountered the same prevailing attitudes from players, and this is an attitude that exists in the real world too. As the pace of the game has picked up, disabled gamers and casual players have been increasingly cut off from content and put into a bucket with the lazy players and the bad players. And yes, there are lazy players who simply want a free ride, and there are bad players who don't want to improve and aren't interested in learning their class mechanics. And being cut off from content and being seen as part of this underclass deprives players of some of the most rewarding experiences in World of Warcraft. There is nothing more rewarding than making a new friend online, having a chat with somebody to alleviate some of the isolation you feel from being trapped in your house all day, or getting together to complete a challenge, whether that be a normal dungeon, a Mythic Plus dungeon, an achievement, grinding out a pet or a mount. And this is something that most non-disabled players take for granted. And what has struck me most during COVID-19 is the number of people who said to me that they have more of an insight into what day-to-day life for disabled people is because they've been stuck in their homes, having to use the internet, having to use World of Warcraft to connect with their friends and meet them online because they can't meet them in person. the number of people who've come back to the game as well for the same reason. And part of that is the reason that I have an issue with the token system. It's the problem with LFD and LFR is that it deprives people of that opportunity to connect with other players. If you're doing LFD or LFR, you aren't doing that to talk to people and make friends through the system. People want to jump into the dungeon, they want to blitz through the content to get to the other end so that they can get on with other content. And it shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody that it takes disabled people longer to do everything. If you require more time, then you are simply delaying them. You are holding them back. And for the most part, this isn't an issue. Many players in the player base are very welcoming and very understanding, particularly those on RP realms. But you always get some people who don't want to take the time to understand or sympathise. They just want to get ahead. And a real life, a real life analogy for this, from my own personal experience, is that I was in a supermarket and I was trying to do my shopping and I was trying to reach something on a shelf, and there was a woman standing behind me, and rather than trying to engage and ask if I wanted help, she simply stood and tutted and tapped her foot because I was delaying her from finishing her shopping. Not cool. And I think worse than that, if that is your first experience of World of Warcraft, your first experience is somebody kicking you from a dungeon, calling you a name, berating you because you are bad, because you suck. And I don't think that does the community justice. As I said in my first video, there are literally hundreds of players with offensive names in World of Warcraft. There are 20 plus guilds that I found, one of which is on my server, that despite constant reporting have either not been forced to change their name or have changed it to something more offensive. And these people portray the whole community in a bad light. Now, while researching for my first video, I actually had a chat with a guy on my server who has named his character Mong. Yeah. Mong, in case you aren't aware, is an offensive slur derived from the word mongoloid that was used to label those with learning difficulties and Down syndrome. But by the time I was at school, it was being applied to anyone with a disability. So I asked him why he had chosen the name that he'd chosen and if he was disabled. And he said it was because Spazatron was taken. And sure enough, when I looked it up, there was a player called Spazatron, and so I found him and I asked him the same question, and he said that he had been forced to change his name from Spazatron by a GM. That really shouldn't be allowed. And I do appreciate that sometimes this language is used because someone loses their temper. I've been called a lot of names by people who didn't get the loot they wanted in raids over the years, because difference is something that people can easily attack. But it is also indicative of an attitude, and an unchallenged attitude that exists in the player base, that the lower end players aren't trying, don't want to engage with the player base, suck at the game and don't want to get any better. And I think this problem stems, from my experience, from a deeply rooted belief that disabled people only have mechanical problems interacting with the game, and that this can be fixed if we buy an eye gaze or a better mouse or a different keyboard. the correct devices will allow us to play the game at the same level as everybody else. And I think Blizzard's catch-up systems, and particularly LFD and LFR, are lazy solutions that don't address the real issue of why so many people are being left behind in the content. Yes, parallel progression is a solution, but not when you create a system which places people in environments that they are subjected to abuse by other players. And before people say it, yes, I can see the abuse with the language filter on, because many of the words used to target disabled people aren't filtered out. And even if I could turn off that language, turning a blind eye to offensive people and offensive behaviour doesn't make the problem go away. Now, I said I would take the day off yesterday. I did. I feel much better. But I also ended up spending most of yesterday responding to DMs and chatting to people online. I'm really pleased that people have responded to my content, and I thank you for bearing with me while I get my feet. I understand now that people really are just asking for help. They want guides on how to interact with the game, because Blizzard is sadly failing them, and I am more than happy to make that content for you. And now I have put some content together for a guide to help players with visual impairment, which will be out tomorrow, and the day after that I will do the guide on my personal setup and how I have compensated for my neurological problems. And then after that I will do class guides on macros, which I know a lot of people are very excited about. It will be really helpful to know what classes people are most interested in me covering, so that I can put them in some sort of order. And I know a lot of people have asked about streaming. This isn't something I'm ready to do yet, but it might be something I would consider sort of in the future. And it would be helpful to know whether people would prefer me to stream on Twitch or on YouTube. I have experience streaming on Twitch, but if the majority of you are on YouTube and you would prefer me to stream on YouTube, I'm happy to do that. So please let me know. And those issues aside, if you're watching this video and you are having problems playing World of Warcraft, then send me a DM or a Twitter, or let me know in the comments down below. I can't fix the game for you. I wish I could, but I may be able to offer you a solution using mods, add-ons or macros that could make you feel a little more included and help you have a much more rewarding experience in Azeroth. Thank you for listening, thank you for your patience, and please do, and I mean it, get in touch.